This is the story of how Disney's most beloved animated film was built on a foundation of stolen ideas, Nazi imagery, and disturbing content that never made it to theaters. When The Lion King premiered on June 15, 1994, audiences saw a heartwarming tale of a young lion finding his destiny, but behind the scenes lay controversies that Disney hoped would stay buried forever. The elephant in the room needs addressing right away, or maybe we should call it the white lion in the room. Disney marketed The Lion King as their first big animated feature that wasn't a retelling of a fairy tale or previous story, coming after The Little Mermaid in 1989, Beauty and the Beast in 1991, and Aladdin in 1992, and they claimed this was their first original animated epic, except there's one massive problem with that claim. Decades before Simba ever graced the screen, Japan had Kimba. Osamu Tezuka, known as Japan's god of manga, created Kimba the White Lion, with the manga running in Manga Shonen magazine from November 1950 to April 1954, and an animated series following from 1965 to 1967 that introduced the story to television audiences worldwide. Matthew Broderick, who voiced adult Simba, made a stunning admission when he claimed that taking the role, he assumed he was doing the voice for Kimba, and he even went around telling others he was voicing Kimba. The lead actor of Disney's supposedly original film thought he was working on an adaptation of the Japanese series, which tells you everything you need to know about how obvious the similarities were. Roy Disney himself, Walt's nephew and a key figure at the company, accidentally called Simba by the name Kimba in an interview before the film's release, and this wasn't just some random outsider making a mistake. This was Roy Disney, someone deeply involved with the production who couldn't keep the name straight. The plot thickens when you learn that Roger Allers, one of The Lion King's co-directors, had worked as an animator in Japan during the 1980s, right when a new Kimba anime was airing in prime time, making the connections impossible to ignore. Georgetown law professor Madhavi Sundar wrote about this controversy in her 2012 book, From Goods to a Good Life: Intellectual Property and Global Justice. And she doesn't hold back, stating that if Tezuka's company, Tezuka Productions, had pursued legal action against Disney after Lion King's release, their case would have been very strong. The irony runs deep because Tezuka had actually produced a licensed manga for Disney's Bambi in 1951 and an unlicensed manga of Pinocchio in 1952, making him both inspired by Disney and apparently an inspiration that Disney would never acknowledge. Tezuka couldn't sue because he'd passed away in 1989, 5 years before The Lion King hit theaters, and his family chose not to pursue legal action, deciding the controversy wasn't worth their time, but those similarities remain documented and undeniable. Borrowing from a Japanese anime was just the beginning, because now we need to talk about one of the most disturbing creative choices in The Lion King, which is the Nazi imagery, and yes, you heard that correctly, Nazi imagery in a Disney film. During Scar's musical number, Be Prepared, history buffs might have recognized something familiar, because that shot of the marching hyenas was confirmed to be lifted directly from footage of the 1935 Third Reich propaganda film Triumph of the Will, directed by Leni Riefenstahl, and this isn't speculation or conspiracy theory, this is confirmed fact. Production designer Chris Sanders revealed that these visuals grew out of one sketch by story staffer Jürgen Klubian that literally pictured Scar as Hitler, and instead of someone saying, maybe that's too far, the team decided to run with it and incorporate actual Nazi propaganda footage into a children's movie. The marching hyenas, the dramatic lighting, and Scar's positioning overlooking his army all deliberately mirror one of the most infamous pieces of propaganda ever created, taking imagery used to promote one of history's greatest evils and putting it in a movie for kids. What Disney cut from The Lion King might disturb you even more than what they kept in the final version. The Hollywood Reporter revealed a deleted scene where Nala comes to Scar's cave to tell him his kingdom is falling apart and needs fixing. But in this deleted scene, Scar decides his reputation would improve if he had an heir and chooses Nala to be his queen. Nala was Simba's childhood friend, someone Scar would have known since she was a cub, and while the scene got cut for obvious reasons, it made it far enough into production to be animated, which shows just how dark the creative team was willing to go. The original finale was completely different from what audiences saw. Oprah magazine revealed that Simba, following his Shakespearean inspiration, was originally meant to die, head-scratching choice for a family film that somehow made it to the storyboarding stage, with evil Uncle Scar delivering Horatio's famous line, "Good night, sweet prince." Initially, the film was much darker throughout, with Simba losing to Scar in the final scene and Scar dying in the fire. No redemption, no circle of life restored, just death and tragedy all around. Even the sequel couldn't escape the darkness, because originally Zira's death involved her refusing Kiara's help and deliberately throwing herself into the river, showing Disney couldn't help writing suicidal villains. The Shakespeare connection goes beyond subtext and straight into deliberate design, with the creators openly admitting their plot's debt to Hamlet, though it started as Bambi in Africa before the characters, themes, and relationships developed those unmistakable Shakespearean echoes. Director Rob Minkoff recalled, "When we first pitched the revised outline of the movie to Michael Eisner, Jeffrey Katzenberg, Peter Schneider, and Tom Schumacher, someone in the room announced that its themes and relationships were similar to Hamlet, and everyone responded favorably to the idea that we were doing something Shakespearean, so we continued to look for ways to model our film on that all-time classic." Screenwriters Irene Mecchi and Jonathan Roberts came in for final revisions, and the sales line transformed from Bambi with lions to Bambi with lions and Hamlet thrown in, with Mecchi calling it Bamblet on the DVD commentary, taking inspiration from Shakespeare's structural instinct to follow scenes of horror or tragedy with uproarious comedy. They nearly went too far when a version of Mufasa's death had Scar utter, "Good night, sweet prince," which producer Don Hahn judged as too self-conscious, forcing them to pull back. Biblical connections also run through the story, with original Lion King producer Don Hahn telling Blu-ray.com that Moses and Joseph were biblical figures whose journeys echo in Simba's story, where a character is born into royalty, is then exiled, and has to return to claim their kingdom, calling these ancient stories of underdogs that we, as an audience, love to see when we go to the theater. So this movie simultaneously rips off Kimba, Hamlet, and the Bible, making their original animated feature anything but original. Production problems plagued the film like a curse, with original director George Scribner walking off the project, creative differences arising with songwriter Elton John, and then the universe itself seemed to intervene with a major earthquake. January 17, 1994, brought a magnitude 6.7 earthquake to Southern California, causing billions of dollars in damage and up to 72 fatalities, while also impacting The Lion King's production and disrupting the animation process just months before the film's release. Here's what might surprise you most about this film's creation. Disney assigned their B team to make the Lion King, while their A team focused on Pocahontas, which everyone expected to be the more successful production. But Pocahontas ended up receiving mixed reviews and earning far less than The Lion King, turning Disney's supposed lesser project into their crown jewel. Development was so chaotic that one of the original titles was King of the Jungle, until someone at Disney finally realized that lions don't actually live in the jungle, showing the level of research and preparation that initially went into this project. Some deeply disturbing themes are baked right into the story itself, things children wouldn't notice but become horrifying when adults think about them too hard. The incest problem stares us right in the face because the movie leads audiences to assume that Mufasa and Scar are the only males in the royal pride, which means they're the only two who can sire offspring with the lionesses, and the result is that Nala and Simba are either cousins or half-siblings, creating a love story between relatives while Disney hoped nobody would think too hard about lion biology. Scar and Mufasa look drastically different because Disney originally planned for them not to be related at all, with Scar just being some outsider lion who came in to stir things up. But when they changed the story to make them brothers, they kept those different designs, leaving one brother golden and majestic while the other stayed dark and scraggly. Mufasa's death traumatized a generation of children, and that's the toned-down version, because the original scene was even sadder but had to be changed after a test audience of children reacted with extreme sobbing, and what we got was the version they thought would be less traumatic. Disney made history with this film by showing a villain committing murder on screen, because usually characters die off screen or through indirect means, but here we watch Scar throw his brother off a cliff. We see the murder happen right in front of us. Scar's death at the end brings its own horror when the hyenas corner and attack him, and while shadows portray the violence, those darkened images of hyenas literally tearing Scar apart remain almost as disturbing as if they'd animated the actual mauling. Technical challenges reveal just how ambitious and problematic this production became, with Disney's CG department spending 3 whole years animating just the wildebeest scene, even creating a brand new program to ensure the animals could run without bumping into each other. 3 years for one scene. Over 600 artists, animators, and technicians contributed during the multi-year production schedule, reportedly crafting more than 1 million drawings for the film. All this effort for a film borrowing liberally from existing sources. The timeline reveals a clear pattern when you look at it. Kimba manga published from 1950 to 1954. Kimba anime aired from 1965 to 1967. Osamu Tezuka dies in 1989, conveniently removing the main person who could challenge Disney. The Lion King enters development from 1988 to 1992. A major earthquake disrupts production in January 1994, and The Lion King releases in theaters on June 15, 1994. Controversy over Kimba similarities erupted immediately after release, yet Disney never acknowledged the influence, never paid tribute to Tezuka, and never admitted what seems obvious to anyone who's seen both works. 2019 brought the live-action remake and resurfaced the controversy for a new generation discovering the Kimba connection. And once again, Disney remained silent, missing their opportunity to set the record straight, acknowledge Tezuka's influence, or pay tribute to an animation pioneer, choosing instead to double down on their original story claim. The Lion King stands as one of Disney's greatest successes, built on borrowed ideas, dark themes, and disturbing imagery the company has never fully acknowledged, from the uncredited influence of Kimba the White Lion to deliberate Nazi propaganda imagery, from deleted scenes featuring attempted assault to original endings where the hero dies, and this development reveals a much darker story than the circle of life narrative Disney wants us to remember. The film that traumatized children with Mufasa's death started out even more traumatic. The movie teaching us about the circle of life nearly became a Shakespearean tragedy, where everyone dies, and the story Disney claimed as their first original animated feature was anything but original. Most telling of all, the very people making the film seemed confused about what they were creating, because when your lead actor thinks he's voicing a different character and Roy Disney himself can't keep the names straight, it points to a production that was heavily influenced by existing work at best, and deliberate appropriation of someone else's creation at worst. Beautiful as it is, technically brilliant as it remains, and culturally significant as it's become, The Lion King also reminds us that the stories behind our favorite movies are sometimes darker than anything making it to the screen. A tale of borrowed stories presented as original ideas, Nazi imagery in children's entertainment, and deleted scenes too dark even for a movie about fratricide and exile. The Lion King's real story has nothing to do with the circle of life and everything to do with how one of the world's most powerful entertainment companies created their biggest animated success on unacknowledged influences and disturbing creative choices, banking on audiences never looking too closely at what they were really watching. Next time you watch The Lion King, you'll see it differently, noticing those goose-stepping hyenas, thinking about Kimba the White Lion, remembering that Simba and Nala are probably related, and realizing what you're watching isn't the original story Disney claimed, but something much more complex, much more problematic, and much darker than that sunny African savanna suggests. That's the real story behind The Lion King, a tale of appropriation, dark imagery, and deleted scenes, revealing just how far Disney was willing to go before pulling back. Proof that even in the Magic Kingdom, not everything is as magical as it seems, because sometimes the real story is darker than fiction, and sometimes the circle of life is actually a circle of borrowed ideas that Disney hoped would never come back around.